Brianna Carter had never seen so much money thrown at one event. Strings of fairy lights draped the sprawling ranch, chandeliers hung inside the massive white tent, and roses spilled from every table like something out of a magazine. Guests in jewel-colored dresses and pressed suits sipped champagne as though the night were already perfect. Except the bride was missing. Brianna adjusted the pale silk dress she'd been forced into. Maid of honor attire wasn't exactly her style, and scanned the crowd again. Her curls, dark with hints of auburn, framed a face that had long ago learned to mask unease. She felt eyes on her even now. Maybe it was her mixed background. Maybe it was her independence. But in circles like these, she always felt just a little out of place. Beside her, the best man leaned against a column, shoulders broad beneath his black suit, a figure both commanding and quietly restless. Wyatt Cole. Ruggedly handsome didn't begin to cover him. His dark skin gleamed under the golden lights, his jawline sharp enough to cut, and his eyes, a stormy brown that never seemed to give too much away, flicked over the restless guests like he was tracking a herd about to scatter. She bolted, Wyatt muttered finally, voice low and edged in disbelief. Brianna turned toward him, startled. "What?" He glanced at her, lips pressed into a grim line. "Bride's gone. Left her dress in the back room, took off before she could say, 'I do.'" Brianna's stomach dropped. Gasps rippled through the tent as whispers began to spread like wildfire. The night unraveled after that, a blur of chaos, champagne and rising tension. Guests argued, gossiped, drank too much. Brianna tried to smooth things over, but when she found herself cornered with Wyatt in the dim, empty dance hall hours later, her composure broke. Frustration burned in her chest. His presence, steady and magnetic, drew her like a moth to flame. And when his hand brushed hers, everything snapped. Drunk on exhaustion and frustration, judgments clouded, their mouths collided, heat searing through the haze of alcohol and heartache. Clothes slipped away, confessions tumbled out in breathless whispers, and before either of them could think better of it, they were tangled together on the polished floor, finding comfort, fire, and something far more dangerous than either wanted to admit. Sunlight spilled across the ranch's guest house bedroom, warm and merciless, dragging Brianna from the shallowest, most restless sleep of her life. Her head pounded, her body ached in ways she hadn't felt in months, and when she shifted, the movement reminded her all too clearly of the night before. Her breath hitched. Oh God. She blinked against the light and turned her head. The space beside her was empty, sheets rumpled, the faint scent of cedar and sweat lingering in the air. Wyatt Cole was gone. Brianna sat up, pulling the sheet to her chest, heart hammering as the pieces came crashing back. The chaos after the bride fled, the too sweet champagne, the way his eyes had locked on hers like he saw every secret she kept hidden. And then the heat of his mouth, the weight of his body, the way he'd whispered her name like a prayer. Her cheeks burned. What had she done? She shoved her curls out of her face and forced herself to breathe. This wasn't her. She didn't let herself get swept up, didn't let someone else's touch unravel her. She had spent years proving she was in control of her own life, to her mother's side of the family who thought she was too much, to her father's who feared she'd forget where she came from, to every man who thought confidence was just an act. And yet, one night with Wyatt, and she had let it all fall apart. The sound of heavy footsteps outside jolted her. She scrambled for her dress, slipping it over her head and pressing a hand to her chest. The door creaked open. Wyatt stood there, hat in hand, still in yesterday's suit pants and a wrinkled shirt. His hair was slightly mussed, his dark skin catching the morning light in a way that made him look both rugged and untouchable. "Hey," he said softly, voice low and uncertain. Brianna's breath caught, her defenses slamming back into place. "Don't." She held up a hand, more for herself than for him. "We were drunk. It was a mistake. That's all." Wyatt's jaw flexed, something flickering in his stormy brown eyes, but he only nodded once. "If that's what you want." He turned, boots heavy against the floorboards, and walked out without another word. The silence he left behind felt heavier than any shame Brianna had ever carried. Welcome back to Porchlight Stories. where tales of self-discovery, impossible choices, and deep, irresistible desires give you a chance to escape the ordinary. If you've been following Brianna and Wyatt's story so far, you know that one reckless night can change everything. But this is just the beginning, and not all secrets stay buried. Before we dive back in, take a moment to like this video and share your thoughts. What's the most reckless choice you've ever made? The one that either became the best mistake of your life or the worst? We want to hear your stories. Buckle up. The drama is just starting to unfold, and the next chapter will pull you deeper into Brianna and Wyatt's tangled world of passion, secrets, and impossible decisions. 2 pink lines. Brianna stared at the test clutched in her shaking hands, her heart slamming so hard against her ribs she could barely breathe. She sat on the closed lid of her bathroom toilet, knees pressed together, her curls falling like a curtain around her face. It couldn't be. Except it was. Her mind replayed the night of the wedding in sharp, blinding detail. Wyatt's mouth on hers, the heat of his skin, the way he had held her like she was the only thing tethering him to the earth. Now, here she was, a month later, and every ounce of certainty she'd built her life on had cracked wide open. She set the test down on the sink and stood, pacing the small apartment. She had worked so hard to build her independence, juggling her landscaping business, keeping herself afloat, proving that she didn't need anyone to carry her. She'd told herself she wouldn't be like her mom, waiting for someone else's choices to shape her life. But life, apparently, had other plans. Her phone buzzed on the counter, making her jump. The name on the screen made her stomach twist. Wyatt Cole. She hadn't spoken to him since the morning after. He hadn't called, hadn't texted, hadn't tried, and she'd told herself that was for the best. He had his own life, his family, their big, shiny ranching empire. She was just a blip, a mistake at a wedding gone wrong. But as she stared at his name glowing on her screen, her hand hovered. Should she answer? Should she tell him? Her thumb trembled above the button before she let the call ring out. Not yet. She wasn't ready. Instead, she grabbed her sketch pad, sat at her drafting table, and forced herself to focus on the lines and curves of a garden design she'd been working on. Except every flower bed blurred, every stone pathway dissolved, replaced by the image of a crib, a tiny hand curling around her finger, a baby's laugh. Her baby's laugh. Brianna pressed her palms to her eyes, whispering into the silence. What am I supposed to do now? For the first time in years, she didn't have an answer. The morning sun stretched across Brianna's truck windshield, blinding her as she pulled up to the massive wrought iron gates. She double-checked the address scribbled on her work order, her stomach flipping. Cole Estate. Her chest tightened. She hadn't said the name out loud in years, and even now it felt strange, heavy, as if it carried all the dust of her teenage memories and the sharp ache of last month's mistake. She killed the engine and sat there for a beat, hands gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. Out of all the jobs she could have landed this spring, why did it have to be here? But business was business. She'd built her landscaping company from scratch, and walking away from a client, especially one with deep pockets, wasn't an option. She slid out of the truck, smoothing her jeans and adjusting the brim of her baseball cap. She'd keep it professional, focus on the work, pretend last month never happened. The gates creaked open, and she drove slowly down the long, winding driveway. Oak trees lined both sides, their branches arching overhead like a tunnel. The main house rose in the distance, white stone wraparound porch big enough to swallow her entire apartment complex twice over. Her throat went dry. She could still remember the first time she'd been here as a teenager, sneaking glances at Wyatt while he laughed with his friends. Always so confident, always so sure of himself. Now, as she parked near the side entrance, she told herself that was all in the past. The crunch of boots on gravel snapped her out of her thoughts. Brianna? Her heart stuttered. She turned, and there he was, Wyatt Cole, rugged, broad-shouldered, his dark skin sunlit against the pale backdrop of the house. His eyes, the same ones that had haunted her dreams since that night, locked onto hers. For a second, Neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, charged, carrying all the weight of what they hadn't said. Finally, Wyatt broke the silence. "Didn't expect to see you here." Brianna cleared her throat, forcing her voice to stay even. "It's just work. Your mother called my office about redesigning the back gardens." Wyatt's jaw ticked, his expression unreadable. She didn't mention who she'd hired. Brianna shifted her tool bag higher on her shoulder. "If it's a problem, I can leave." Something flickered across his face. Panic, maybe, or something deeper, but he shook his head quickly. "No, don't. Stay." Her pulse jumped. She hadn't expected him to say that. "Professional," she reminded herself again. "Just keep it professional." "Then let's get started," she said briskly, moving past him toward the gardens before he could see the storm swirling in her eyes. Wyatt watched her go, the same thought pounding through his head over and over. She was back, and this time, walking away might not be so easy. Brianna crouched low to the ground, fingers brushing through the rich soil as she mapped out the garden beds in her head. The back lawn stretched wide, ending in a view of the rolling hills, a scene so serene it almost mocked the tightness in her chest. She could feel Wyatt's presence long before she saw him. Heavy footsteps, the faint scent of leather and cedar drifting on the spring breeze. "I can grab you a sketch of what my mother had in mind," he offered, his deep voice steady but carrying an undercurrent she couldn't quite place. "I prefer to work from my own designs," Brianna replied, standing and brushing dirt from her jeans. She lifted her chin, her tone clipped, hoping the professional barrier would hold. "I'll do a site evaluation and send her a draft by the end of the week." His eyes lingered on her face, then dipped, just briefly, toward the flat plane of her stomach before flicking back up. Too quick for most people to catch, but not her. Not when she'd been avoiding her reflection in mirrors lately for the same reason. Heat rushed to her cheeks. "Something wrong?" Wyatt cleared his throat, his expression hardening like a man caught. "No, nothing," but the distance in his tone cut sharper than any insult. They circled each other like strangers in something else, two people bound by a secret pretending it didn't exist. Brianna bent back down, sketch pad in hand, but her hand trembled as she drew. She hated how much power he still had over her, how just being near him made her chest ache with the memory of his hands on her skin, his breath at her ear, the night they'd both sworn would stay buried. "You've done well for yourself," Wyatt said suddenly, surprising her. "Your company, your reputation. Not everyone around here makes it out of town and back on their own terms." Brianna paused, pencil hovering. Compliment or warning? She couldn't tell. "Thanks," she said carefully. "I worked for it. Nobody handed me anything." The jab landed. His jaw tightened. Some of us don't get to choose the paths we're handed either. Her gaze snapped up to his. "And some of us pay the price for choices we didn't make." Silence crashed between them, sharp and unforgiving. For a moment, neither breathed. Finally, Wyatt ran a hand over the back of his neck, breaking eye contact. "Look, I don't want things to get ugly between us. Not here. Not with my family watching every move." Her heart thudded painfully. His family. The reminder stung more than she cared to admit. "Then let's keep it simple," she said, her voice even though her throat was tight. "You stay out of my way, I'll do my job, and when it's done I'll leave. No reason to pretend this is anything more than business." Wyatt stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable flickering in his dark eyes. Then he nodded once, sharp, and turned away. But as Brianna watched him walk back toward the house, shoulders broad and stiff with tension, she realized the lie in her own words. This wasn't just business, not anymore, not with the secret she carried, growing more undeniable every day. Brianna had spent the morning sketching out garden layouts, her hands smudged with pencil and soil when she felt it, the subtle shift in the air that always preceded trouble. Wyatt's sister Tessa stepped onto the porch, her heels clicking like a metronome of malice. She was impossibly put together, from her sleek blonde hair to the tailored cream blouse tucked into high-waisted pants. But Brianna had learned that perfection often hid poison. "Brianna, darling," Tessa said sweetly, voice dripping with honeyed menace. "How Interesting to see you here. Brianna straightened, masking the irritation curling in her chest. Morning, Tessa. Her voice was clipped but polite. Tessa circled her, heels tapping, eyes sharp, assessing every detail. I must admit, I was surprised Mother would involve you in the estate projects. I mean, we all know how complicated last month was. The words landed like stones. Brianna's stomach clenched. She met Tessa's gaze evenly, forcing calm into her tone. I'm here to do a job. That's all. Tessa smiled sweetly, but the sharpness in her eyes was unmistakable. Of course, just do be careful. Rumors have a way of spreading, especially in small circles like this. You wouldn't want anyone to think you're manipulating Wyatt, like your runaway bride of a best friend, would you? Brianna's hands clenched at her sides. She wanted to snap, to let Tessa know that she was not some scheming girl angling for the heir's approval, but she bit back the words, knowing that confrontation would only give Tessa more ammunition. Wyatt appeared then, footsteps heavy, dark eyes sweeping over the tense scene. Everything okay? Tessa turned, the mask of sweetness unwavering. Of course, dear brother. I was merely giving Brianna some friendly advice. Wyatt's jaw tightened ever so slightly. He gave Brianna a look that said, I've got this, and then focused on his sister. She doesn't need advice, Tessa. Tessa's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Very well, she said, backing away. But the whisper of her warning lingered like smoke. Be careful with her type, brother. You don't know what she'll do next. Once she was gone, Wyatt exhaled and ran a hand over his face. I hate her, he muttered, voice low, but Brianna caught the way his eyes flicked to her stitch before meeting hers. I know, she said softly, tension still coiled in her chest. I've dealt with worse. His hand brushed hers briefly, a fleeting touch that carried reassurance, protection, and a promise he didn't voice aloud. For Brianna, the warning Tessa had left behind wasn't just about gossip or jealousy. It was a reminder that this world, Wyatt's world, was nothing like her own. And the closer she got to him, the more dangerous it became. The late afternoon sun spilled across the Cole estate study, painting the hardwood floor in streaks of gold. Brianna tucked her sketch pad into her bag, ready to leave, when Wyatt's voice stopped her. You've been different lately, he said, leaning against the desk, arms folded. His dark eyes narrowed in quiet study. Quieter, jumpy, tired, like you haven't been sleeping well. Her pulse spiked. She hadn't meant for him to notice. She'd worked hard to keep her secret, to bury the truth under professional small talk and long hours in the garden beds. But now, cornered by his unflinching stare, the lie of omission felt too heavy to carry any longer. I haven't, she admitted softly, turning to face him. Her hands tightened around the strap of her bag. And since we're working together, it's only fair you know. Wyatt's brow furrowed. Know what? She drew a slow breath, her chest tight. I'm pregnant. The word hung in the room like thunder. His body stilled, his face draining of expression. He swallowed hard. Is it mine? Her heart twisted, but she met his eyes steadily. Yes, that night, it wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And I'm not here because I want something from you, Wyatt. I don't want your money. I don't want your name. I can raise this child on my own. Wyatt's jaw clenched, his chest rising with the force of his breathing. So why tell me at all? Brianna shifted, her voice low but firm. Because you deserve to know. Because you'll see changes in me, and I didn't want to lie. This way, at least the truth is out. What you do with it, that's on you. Silence stretched, broken only by the sound of the grandfather clock ticking in the corner. He ran a hand over his face, then down the back of his neck, as though he could scrub away the shock clinging to him. She took his silence for what it was, proof that he wasn't ready, that maybe he never would be. I'll still finish the landscape, she said, her voice steadier now. But whatever happens between us from here on out, it's not about us, it's about the child. That's my only boundary. And with that, she walked out, her footsteps echoing against the wood floors until the door closed softly behind her. Wyatt remained frozen, staring at the space where she had been. The words replayed in his head, looping over and over. "I'm pregnant. It's yours. I want nothing from you." Shock settled into his bones, but beneath it, something else stirred. Questions he'd never let himself ask before. Am I ready for this? Do I even know how to be a father? What will my family say? What will they do? The thought of his parents' fury, Tessa's whispers, the land deal on the line, it all pressed in on him, but louder than all of it was a quieter truth rising from somewhere deep in his chest. He didn't want to walk away. He didn't want to let her carry this alone. For the first time in his life, the reckless son, the charming best man who never planned beyond tomorrow, wanted something bigger, something real, and it terrified him as much as it thrilled him. Wyatt sat alone in the dim glow of his father's study hours later, a half-empty glass of bourbon in his hand. The fire crackled low in the hearth, but its warmth couldn't chase off the chill settling deep in his bones. Pregnant. The word replayed again and again, cutting through the silence like a hammer to glass. He tipped the glass back, but the burn of whiskey didn't help. He'd been stunned before, by stampeding cattle, by weather that turned without warning, by women he thought he understood but didn't, but nothing compared to the weight of this. A child. His child. His mind spun in jagged circles. He could still see Brianna's face when she'd said it, steady and unflinching, even as she stripped him bare with the truth. She hadn't asked for anything. She hadn't begged, manipulated, or hinted. She'd stood there like a storm, refusing to bow, telling him she could do this alone. The stubborn part of him almost didn't believe her, but another part, the deeper, truer part, knew better. Wyatt rubbed his hands over his face, groaning low in his throat. Hell. Was he ready to be a father? Images assaulted him. His own father's harsh words when Wyatt messed up on the ranch, his mother's cold silences when he didn't live up to expectation. He'd grown up under the shadow of duty, of land and legacy, of a name that had to be protected at all costs. And now, he was about to bring a child into that same fire. A child who deserved better. He poured another drink but didn't touch it, staring into the glass instead. For years he'd lived as if tomorrow would sort itself out, hiding behind his family's wealth, their reputation, their expectations. He'd never had to question who he was or what he wanted. Until now. Now, he wanted something he couldn't ignore. He wanted to be there when the baby took its first breath. He wanted to shield Brianna from every whisper, every sideways glance, every manipulative smile Tessa threw her way. He wanted to fight, really fight, for something more than the Cole name. But fear gnawed at him. His parents would never accept this, not with the marriage alliance they'd already arranged, not with their plans to expand their holdings. To them, Brianna wasn't just the wrong choice, she was a threat. He let out a sharp laugh, bitter and low. They'll crucify me. And yet, for the first time, Wyatt realized he didn't care what they thought. Brianna's voice echoed in his head. It's not about us, it's about the child. She'd drawn the boundary, but boundaries could shift. He wasn't sure when or how, but he knew this much: he wasn't going to let her shoulder this burden alone. He set the untouched bourbon aside and leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling until the fire burned down to embers. By the time dawn crept through the windows, Wyatt Cole had made a quiet, bone-deep decision. Whatever it took, whatever it cost, he would not walk away. The morning air was crisp, heavy with the scent of freshly turned soil. Brianna was kneeling in the garden beds, sketchpad open beside her, when she heard the crunch of boots on gravel. She didn't have to look up. She knew it was him. Wyatt's shadow stretched across her paper, blotting out the sun. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a voice low and edged with something she couldn't name, he said, "We need to talk." Brianna sighed, setting her pencil down with deliberate care. "I said everything I needed to say yesterday." "Not everything," he countered, his tone harder than usual. "You can't just drop news like that and walk away." Her eyes flicked up to his, steady and unflinching. "Why not? You asked if it was yours. I told you the truth." And I made it clear, I don't want anything from you. His jaw worked, the muscle ticking. That's not the point, Brianna. Then what is the point? She shot back, rising to her feet. The morning light caught the fire in her eyes. You think I came here to trap you? To derail your perfect family alliances? I told you because you deserve to know. That's it. What you do with it is up to you. Wyatt stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her chin to meet his gaze. His voice dropped, raw and searching. You really think I can just go on like nothing's changed? That I can watch you carry my child and keep my distance? Her throat tightened, but she held her ground. Yes, because that's the boundary I've set. This isn't about you and me, Wyatt. Whatever happened that night, it doesn't magically make us a couple. This is about the baby, and I'll protect that line with everything I have. The words sliced between them, sharp and deliberate. For a heartbeat, his face flickered, hurt, anger, maybe even fear, but he masked it quickly. You're stubborn as hell, he muttered, almost to himself. Learned from the best, she said, her voice soft but pointed. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It thrummed with everything unsaid. The night they couldn't take back, the child that bound them now, whether they liked it or not, the push and pull of a connection they both felt but refused to name. Finally, Wyatt exhaled, raking a hand through his hair. Fine, boundaries. I'll respect them, but don't think for a second I'm going to let you do this alone. Brianna swallowed, her heart thudding. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that his words weren't just heat-of-the-moment defiance against his own fear. But trust, she reminded herself, was a luxury she couldn't afford. Then prove it, she said quietly, gathering her sketch pad and moving past him without another glance. Wyatt watched her go, his chest heavy, knowing this was only the beginning of a battle neither of them were ready for. The day after their clash, the ranch seemed to hold its breath. Even the wind through the aspens moved softly, as though it didn't want to stir the unease lingering in the air. Brianna kept herself busy, sketching out irrigation lines, marking beds with wooden stakes, moving quietly from task to task. She avoided the house when she could, choosing instead to eat her lunch perched on the split-rail fence, the wide fields stretching endlessly before her. But she could feel his presence, always near, always watching. Wyatt had been different since their argument, not distant exactly, but quieter, careful. He worked the horses longer than usual, pushed himself in the barn, and when he passed her his usual easy drawl was replaced with short, measured words. It was as if he was trying to rein himself in, to hold to the boundary she'd drawn. By mid-afternoon, Brianna ducked into the barn for shade, the scent of hay and leather wrapping around her like a familiar cloak. She traced her hand along the saddle she'd been restoring, letting the repetitive motion ground her. Footsteps behind her made her spine stiffen. I didn't mean to scare you, Wyatt's voice came, low and uncertain. She turned, catching the faintest trace of weariness in his eyes. He wasn't the unshakable rancher everyone else saw. He was a man fraying at the edges. I'm not scared, she replied evenly. Just focused. He lingered near the doorway, hands braced against the frame, as if holding himself back. I've been thinking about what you said, about the boundaries. Her chest tightened, but she kept her tone calm. Good. Boundaries are important. He gave a humorless laugh. Yeah, maybe too important. He paused, then his eyes caught hers, steady and searching. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Brianna. Hell, I don't even know what ready looks like. But I keep telling myself, maybe being ready isn't the point. Maybe showing up is... The words unsettled her. They were too close to the things she wanted to hear but couldn't let herself believe. She busied her hands with the leather straps, not trusting her voice right away. I'm not asking you to be ready, she finally said, softer now. I'm asking you to be honest, with me, with yourself, that's all. The silence between them stretched, but it wasn't the sharp cutting silence of before. It was weighted, thoughtful. Wyatt nodded slowly, as if committing something to memory. Then, with a small tilt of his hat, he turned and left the barn, the echo of his boots fading into the afternoon stillness. Brianna stood there long after he was gone, her hands trembling against the saddle. For a fleeting moment, she almost wished the storm would break sooner, because the quiet between them was becoming far too dangerous. The quiet could only last so long. By the week's end, Brianna found herself in the main house, spread across the dining table with blueprints and sketches for the formal gardens. She'd avoided this room for days. It was too close to Wyatt's family, too full of watchful eyes, but the weather had driven her indoors. She was bent over her plans when she heard it, the low hum of voices drifting from the hall, laughter first, then a sharp hush. The Cole family was home. Wyatt's parents swept in first, both polished and poised, the kind of presence that filled a room without effort. Behind them came his sister, eyes glittering, smile just a little too sharp. Brianna rose, polite, steady, professional. "Mr. and Mrs. Cole," she greeted. "Oh, you must be the designer," his mother said smoothly, though her gaze lingered just a fraction too long on Brianna's face, her hands, her posture. "Wyatt has spoken about you." Wyatt followed them in, his jaw tight, his eyes immediately locking on Brianna. Something unspoken flickered in his expression, a silent warning. Dinner was inevitable. They insisted she stay. Against her better judgment, she did. The meal began pleasantly enough, small talk over roasted beef and fresh bread, but Brianna could feel it, thin threads of tension winding tighter with every course. And then his sister leaned forward, chin propped delicately on her hand. "So, Brianna," she said, syrupy sweet, "you've certainly made yourself at home around here, haven't you?" The words carried a weight Brianna couldn't ignore. Her pulse quickened. "I'm just here to work," she replied evenly. "Funny," the sister said, eyes glinting, "because people are starting to say you're after something else." The table stilled. Wyatt's fork hit his plate with a soft clatter. "That's enough," he said sharply. But the damage was done. His mother's brows arched, his father's lips pressed thin, and suddenly Brianna felt exposed under their scrutiny. She pushed back her chair. "Thank you for dinner," she said, her voice steady though her hands trembled at her sides. "But I think I should go." Wyatt stood abruptly. "I'll walk you out." The air between them was thick as they moved down the hall. At the door, Brianna finally let the mask slip, her voice low but fierce. "This is what I meant, Wyatt. This is why I said it had to be about the baby, not us. Your family doesn't want me here. They won't ever accept this." His eyes burned with something she couldn't name, anger, regret, longing. "Don't let them scare you off, Brianna, please." But she shook her head, her hand already on the doorknob. "It's not fear. It's reality." And then she was gone, leaving him standing alone in the wide, echoing entryway, the storm finally breaking inside him. The slam of the front door echoed long after Brianna's footsteps disappeared into the night. Wyatt stood rooted in place, shoulders heaving, every muscle wound tight. "Wyatt!" His mother's voice was calm, too calm. "Is there something we should know?" His chest constricted. He turned slowly, meeting their stares, his mother's sharp, his father's weighty, his sister's smug with victory. "No," he said flatly, though his voice betrayed him with the slightest hitch. The lie clung bitter on his tongue. His father leaned forward, his tone deliberate. "This ranch, this family, everything we've built, it depends on you making the right choices. You can't let yourself get tangled up with a distraction." The word made Wyatt's blood boil. "She's not a distraction," he snapped, fists curling tight at his sides. His sister's smile spread, thin and poisonous. "Then what is she, Wyatt? A fling? Or something you'll regret when that baby's born?" His heart stopped. The air crackled. His parents' eyes widened, his mother's hand flying to her mouth. The secret was out. Wyatt's breath came ragged now, the walls pressing in. "That's enough," he growled, but the weight of their stares said it all. The truth had been loosed, and there was no taking it back. He left them there, storming into the night. The cold air slapped him in the face as he crossed the yard, boots crunching hard against gravel. At the far end of the paddock he stopped, chest heaving, eyes staring out into the dark horizon. A baby, his baby. He thought about Brianna's steady eyes when she told him, about the strength in her voice when she said she didn't need him, about the quiet ache that cut deeper than any wound he'd ever taken. Could he do this? Could he be a father? The fear gnawed at him. He wasn't ready. God, he wasn't ready. But for the first time in his life, Wyatt realized that ready or not didn't matter. What mattered was stepping up. He turned back toward the house, where the faint glow of lantern lights spilled from the windows. His family's voices carried faintly, sharp and furious. Let them rage. Let them scheme. For the first time, Wyatt knew where his loyalty belonged, and it wasn't with them. Brianna was knee-deep in the garden beds when she heard the crunch of boots behind her. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. The air shifted when Wyatt was near, thickening, pulling her into awareness no matter how much she tried to resist. She straightened slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. If you're here to talk about your family's dinner, don't. I've already forgotten it. Wyatt shook his head, stepping closer, his shadow spilling over her. His eyes were restless, storm-dark, as if he hadn't slept. I'm not here about them. I'm here about us, about the baby. Her chest tightened, but she forced herself to keep her voice steady. I told you, I don't need anything from you. I can handle this on my own. I know you can. His tone softened, a crack in the armor. But that doesn't mean you should. Brianna, I want to be there, every step of the way. She let out a shaky laugh, part disbelief, part defense. And what? Pretend like we're suddenly a couple? Like your family isn't already sharpening their knives behind my back? His jaw tensed, but he didn't look away. I don't care what they say. I care about this child. I care about you. Her stomach twisted at the words. They were everything she wanted to hear, but everything she couldn't let herself trust. She crossed her arms, creating a barrier between them. No, Wyatt, we're not doing this. You'll be part of the baby's life, yes. Doctor visits, milestones, whatever you're ready for. But me, my life, my heart, that's off limits. The words landed heavy. For a moment she thought he'd argue, that he'd push. But instead, he nodded slowly, pain etched deep into his features. Fine, he said, his voice rough. If that's the boundary you want, I'll respect it. But I'll prove to you, Brianna, prove that I'm not going anywhere. Not this time. He turned and walked away, boots dragging against the dirt, leaving her standing in the half-built garden with her heart pounding and her resolve trembling. For the first time, she wondered if her walls were strong enough to withstand the storm he was promising to bring. Brianna sat in the waiting room of Dr. Lyle's office, hands folded tightly over the swell of her stomach. She'd almost convinced herself to come alone, easier, cleaner, less complicated. But when the door opened, Wyatt walked in. Not rushed, not flustered, just steady, like he belonged there. Her throat tightened. You didn't have to come. I know. He dropped into the chair beside her, broad shoulders brushing hers, warmth radiating off his body. But I wanted to. She wanted to argue, to tell him this wasn't what she meant when she said he could be involved. But the truth was, his presence settled her. For the first time in weeks she felt like she could breathe. Inside the exam room, as the doctor guided the wand over her stomach and the grainy image flickered to life on the screen, Wyatt's hand tightened on hers. His eyes went wide, stunned, as the rhythmic thump-thump-thump filled the space. Our baby, he whispered, reverent. Brianna's heart stuttered. She didn't dare look at him. Afterward, back at the ranch, he didn't push. He didn't linger in her space. Instead, he found quiet ways to show up. He carried lumber for her garden beds, hauled bags of mulch without being asked, left cold water bottles by her workbench when the sun beat down too hard. He didn't demand thanks. He just stayed. But if Wyatt's presence was a balm, his family's pressure was poison. One evening, as he crossed the yard with a shovel in hand, his sister intercepted him, smile sharp as glass. You're really playing the doting father, aren't you? He stiffened, jaw ticking. I'm doing what's right. Right? She laughed, a brittle sound. You're throwing away everything. Alliances, land, legacy. For a girl who doesn't even want you. She made that clear, didn't she? The words hit too close. For a split second, doubt whispered through him. But then he remembered the sound of that heartbeat, the way Brianna's eyes softened when she thought he wasn't looking. He pushed past his sister without a word. That night, alone in his room, Wyatt sat on the edge of his bed, head in his hands. His family was tightening their grip, trying to bend him back into the mold they'd built for him. But for the first time, Wyatt knew something they didn't. He wasn't bending, not this time. The dining room was too quiet. Wyatt knew before he even stepped through the door that this wasn't a family meal. It was an ambush. His father sat at the head of the table, posture stiff, eyes sharp, his mother beside him, lips pressed into a thin line. And his sister? She leaned back in her chair with that smug smile, the kind that said she'd been waiting for this moment. "Sit down, Wyatt," his father said. Not a request, a command. Wyatt remained standing. "What's this about?" His mother folded her hands. "It's about your future, about this ranch, about the family name. You've been distracted, and it has to stop." His chest tightened, heat crawling up his neck. "If this is about Brianna—" "It is," his father cut in. His voice was calm but cold as steel. "You will end this. Now. We've worked too hard to let you throw it all away for a mistake." Wyatt's hands curled into fists. "She's not a mistake. She's a liability," his sister said sweetly. "Dragging your name through the mud, using that baby to trap you. Everyone can see it, Wyatt, except you." The words struck deep because they echoed his own private fears. But then he remembered Brianna's face in the exam room, the way she told him she wanted nothing from him. She hadn't asked for his money, his name, his land. She'd asked for honesty, and he realized his family had no idea who she really was. Wyatt's voice shook, but not with fear, with fury. "That child is mine, my responsibility, my future. And if you can't accept that, then maybe this ranch isn't mine to inherit after all." The silence that followed was deafening. His father's face hardened, his mother gasped softly, and for once his sister had no quick retort. Wyatt turned, ready to walk out, ready to put walls between himself and the people who'd raised him when his father's voice lashed out like a whip. "If you leave this family behind for her, don't expect to come back." Wyatt froze, every muscle trembling. It was the ultimatum he'd always feared. Family or love, land or heart, legacy or life. He swallowed hard, his voice rough but resolute. "Then I guess you've made my choice real easy." And without another word, he left them sitting in their silence, the door slamming behind him. For the first time, Wyatt knew he wasn't just walking away from their expectations. He was walking towards something, someone, worth more than all the land in Texas. The garden was finished. Rows of wildflowers burst in color, climbing vines curled along trellises, and the soft gurgle of a fountain carried through the late summer air. Brianna stood back, hands on her hips, breathing in the satisfaction of seeing it whole. She hadn't expected him to keep coming after the fight with his family. But Wyatt did, quietly at first, dropping off supplies, offering to fix a broken fence post, bringing her sweet tea on blistering afternoons. He never asked for more than she allowed. He never pushed past the boundary she'd drawn. And somehow, in those small, steady gestures, he'd begun to earn her trust. Now, as the evening light slanted across the ranch, she felt the baby shift inside her, strong and certain. She pressed her hand to her belly, smiling despite the ache that still lingered from all the battles fought. The crunch of boots on gravel made her turn. Wyatt stood at the edge of the path, hat in hand, his expression unreadable. "I heard you were finishing up today," he said quietly. "I was." She looked back at the garden. "Turned out better than I planned." His eyes softened. So did a lot of things. For a moment neither spoke. The breeze carried the scent of fresh earth, the low hum of cicadas, the unspoken tension between them. Then Wyatt took a step closer. "Brianna, I can't promise I'll be perfect. God knows I'll mess up. But I'll be here, for the baby, for you if you'll let me. I'm done choosing between what my family wants and what I know is right." Her throat tightened, eyes stinging. She wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it scared her. "You don't have to be here for me," she whispered, her voice trembling, "just for the baby." He nodded, but there was no mistaking the truth in his gaze. "I'm here for both." The wall she'd built wavered, fragile under the weight of his quiet conviction. She took a slow breath, then reached out, placing her hand over his. "Then we'll take it one step at a time," she said softly. The relief that crossed his face nearly undid her. He lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles, a promise, a vow, a beginning. As the sun dipped low, casting the garden in golden light, Brianna realized this wasn't the ending she'd feared. It was the start of something wild, unsteady, and maybe, just maybe, meant to be. Thank you for spending time with us here at Porchlight Stories, where secrets, choices, and love come alive. The best man's biggest secret reminds us that sometimes the hardest battles aren't with the world around us, but with the walls we build inside ourselves. Trust, forgiveness, and love are never easy, but the things worth keeping rarely are. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next journey waiting just beyond the porch light. And before you go, let us know in the comments, would you have chosen love or walked away to protect yourself? We'd love to hear your thoughts, because in every choice there's a story and maybe a new beginning.